Just catching it.
I wouldn't, so probably, I wouldn't get any further than that, obviously, like, don't push into it. Don't let it.
So
Okay, so, yeah, let's get into it. So we're gonna do a little reverse interview, and, Jim and Jeff are friends of mine and we're all in the fantasy football league, so that's why I decided to have you guys on, because fantasy football. So Jim's gonna do a lot of the questions today. We'll probably all do a bunch of the questions. But let's start off with just talking a little bit about who we are. I mean, I think everybody knows me, the physical therapist. Jim, tell us a little bit about your background.
all right. Well, I am not a doctor, but I've been actively working out since I was in middle school. That's kind of how I came across with Jeff. We met at the gym. And we're still kind of working out avidly now. My diet is basically eat what I can, what I want. I have kids, so it's not always as clean as what Jeff's is, but I got nothing.
Okay.
Next person.
Yeah, tell us about your background. And Jim, would you mind just shutting off that fan right there? Just turn it off on the bottom one. It might get a little hot here, the bottom one.
The bottom one?
Yeah. All the way to off. There we go. That's just gonna sound better. Might get a little toasty in here, but it's all right.
We'll survive.
Yeah. So, all right, Jeff, so tell us about your background. How did you get into fitness and nutrition?
Well, my name's Jeff, like you said, and 8 years ago, I was shooting heroin every day and on my way to prison. And I spent about 20 years using drugs, selling drugs, doing all the wrong things, totally abusing my body. And so when I was in jail, I started to work out a little bit, started to do what I could with the food, started reading quite a bit. So it was just wanted to educate myself about how to kind of rebuild myself, mind, body, and spirit, after all that time of destruction. And so I really just got interested in nutrition and how food can positively impact or negatively impact your physical and mental health. And so that was kind of the beginning of my direction down the rabbit hole, I guess.
And how long would you say it took for you to get on a path, well, to the point that you felt really healthy again? How long did it take you to recover? Rough estimate.
Yeah, a few years.
Uh-huh.
You can't undo 20 years worth of damage in 6 weeks. It doesn't work like that. Whether it's drugs like I was involved in, or if it's being overweight or whatever it is, you can't undo 20 years of bad habits in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So it took several years, I think, to really kind of get started down the right direction where you could see some improvement. And from there, I think there's been some bigger leaps, but it took a few years to really get it started.
Okay, we set out to have Jim do most of the questions, but now I'm really interested, so I'm gonna ask a whole bunch.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I'm just gonna take it and run with it. So yeah.
Okay, do you think that on a philosophical level, like basically all damage incurred from heroin, do you think it's basically all reversible, or is there a point where just too much damage is done?
I think the body is a pretty miraculous machine, and you can do quite a job at healing yourself if you put the right protocol into practice. Is there some damage potentially that I did that I can't reverse? Maybe so. But my outlook is I'm going to do everything I can to try and balance all of that out. So there's things about IV drug users, higher incidence of Parkinson's, dementia and things like that. Can I offset those things? I don't know, but I'm sure going to try. Yeah.
What is your driving force? Is that the driving force right there?
That's what I was gonna ask too.
What keeps you on the right path? Is it just the fear of something like dementia?
No, it's just I feel like I traveled so far down the wrong road that I'm just determined to do the opposite. And because I did everything the wrong way, I feel like it's kind of like bumper bowling, right? When I run into the wrong thing, it kind of throws me back on track because I know all the wrong stuff. I did it all, and so for me, it's just this kind of constant check, right? Of are you doing the right thing? Because diet is something you have to do all the time. Like it's a lifelong practice, right? You're going to eat multiple times a day for the rest of your life, right? So it's kind of like every time you eat a meal, you can kind of check yourself, did I do the right things here? And if not, you should kind of be able to feel where that is and kind of find your way back to the middle and keep going.
Yeah, I call that like course correction.
Course correction.
There's my brother gave me this little analogy and I love it. because it's all about the little things over time. Like you're going to make little errors. So you don't have to eat a perfect diet all the time, but you have to always correct back, in my opinion. So he makes this analogy: if you're in a ship setting sail from England, you're aiming for New York, and you're off by 1 degree south, you end up in Brazil. So if you're not always course correcting, you end up in a really bad place. Not that Brazil's a bad place.
And your wife from Brazil?
Yeah, my wife's Brazilian.
But you know what's interesting is like that's how I ended up where I did, right? I didn't start selling drugs and using drugs the way I did at the end. When I was 15, it didn't start like that. I started just 1 degree in the wrong direction, and I just continued to drift slowly over time. And then I got to a place where it was unrecognizable. Like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
You know, if you would have told me at 15 where I was going to be at 35, I would have laughed in your face, right? But I mean, maybe I was more than 1 degree off, right? But I was off just a little bit and did that for consistent period of time. And so I ended up just totally lost. And so that really that's the course correction apparently that I needed to send me back onto the right track.
Wow. I'm sure so many people can relate to that in so many different, even if it's like weight gain or whatever, you kind of wake up one day like, how did I get here?
Yes.
And well, so congratulations.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Well, I'm proud of him.
Yeah.
Like not many people can make the turnaround transition that Jeff has, and it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I've seen him like, damn it, I got a ex-addict who's older than I am, and he can just destroy me in anything physically, and I'm like, this sucks. How did this happen?
But you know, it's a daily practice, right? To be on the right track. I don't care if you went in the wrong direction or not. Like to stay on the right track, it takes constant effort. That's why I think nutrition is so important, because again, like I just said, you have to do it multiple times a day, every day for the rest of your life.
Yes. All right. Let's just get right into nutrition, because I'm like salivating over this topic.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, I guess we should say that I think from what I know of Jeff, that we're pretty well aligned. We're both pretty well read on nutrition. Jim's a little more
I'll try
mac
to be
cheese,
as
cereal.
unbiased as possible.
I'm just kidding.
No. Yeah, I'll try to be more unbiased. I know you guys are definitely more the red meat, the saturated fats, the raw milks, the everything else. So I guess.
Yeah, I just found some raw milk at Food and Thought, by the way.
Nice.
Yeah, so let's start about talking like, okay, so what does your nutrition look like, Jim? What does your daily meal plan look like? Is there a plan?
Do you have to ask me that with a big smile on your face? Like, I'm gonna say something bad. It's not terrible, man.
I have kids too, so I know it's like
no, so can my diet be better? Of course, can everybody's, but I'll usually start mine off with like oatmeal in the day. And then for a lunch, it's basically whatever's left over from the night before for dinner. But we try to switch it up with fish, chicken, and red meat. Obviously, my wife's, you met her, she's a little bit more health conscious with cholesterol levels and stuff like that. So she'll be quick to be like, all right, let's slow up on the red meat. Let's eat some seafood, some fish. Like, okay, no problem. But she's a big believer. We're heavy protein eaters for sure, no matter whether it's seafood or chicken or poultry meat, but vegetables and carbs.
Okay.
Kind of pretty much in every meal.
What protein would you say you guys have the most of?
Red meat and then fish.
Oh, red meat, really? Oh,
Mhm.
okay. I wasn't
But
expecting
it's 3 times a week red meat, 3 times fish, 1 times chicken.
that.
If I had to guess.
You think that's a good mix there, Jeff?
Yeah, balance is always all right.
Any critiques?
Like to me, it's like protein and fats are the biggest things that I think should be consumed. I think the carbs should be more limited. I don't like any of these extreme diets where it's like, oh, I'm gonna eat no carbs or I'm gonna eat no fat, or I don't think that's a great idea. There's 3 macronutrients. I think you should consume some of each of those.
Yeah, and I think you can tweak them depending on the person. If someone's diabetic, you're gonna compress the carbs down, obviously.
Yeah.
If someone's working out a ton, probably up the carbs a bit. So I think you can kind of use the carbs as a tool depending on where the person's at.
Definitely. Yeah.
So Jeff, you would use your diet. What's the drive behind the motive behind yours? Yours is I've done the research and I feel like this is the best for optimum performance, for burning fat, gaining muscle mass.
Based on where I was with my health and my lifestyle, I just try to educate myself about what's the best choices I can make with the information that I have. And I've changed my diet over time drastically. And I'm still I'm in the process of right now eating more red meat, a little bit less fish. I don't eat chicken, but I've kind of had that idea in my head for a while that maybe red meat is not good for you. Right. But the more I've been reading about it, the more I'm thinking, well, maybe I just didn't have good information. Where did I come up with these ideas? And it wasn't because I had done the research and arrived at that conclusion. It was just these are the things that are regurgitated in society, like, oh, red meat's bad for you, like cholesterol, things like that. They're kind of buzzwords that get thrown out there. But as I've read books from people who have done research and cite studies and things like that, about the benefits of red meat, I'm like, well, maybe I should rethink that too. So, and I think that's another big thing, is that just because you find out today that some information you were relying on is not good, don't go blow your brains out. It's not over. Like, just take that information and move forward in a different direction.
Right.
Constantly learning.
Yeah, we're constantly learning, and like, science is only good as the person that's interpreting it. And so we constantly have new information that comes about that blows old information out of the water. Like, well, that was no good. So what do? We take that new information, we apply it to our situation, and then we keep going.
Yep. Not to mention the environment's constantly changing too. So fish is a perfect example. I think fish a couple hundred years ago was probably one of the best sources of protein, probably. But now it's laden with plastic. So I actually limit my fish to maybe once a week for that one reason.
Heavy metals and plastics, and then so much of it is farm raised, right?
Yep.
So it's not even like a real animal in a sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I know if there's a fad or a diet out there, you've tried it, because you've always come up, like, you've done it firsthand. You're like, well, let me just see how I react to it. And it doesn't, from what you eat to how you eat, because you've done fasting and tried, how to separate your meals and everything else. You've read and researched every diet and way to eat out there. Whereas Jeff is like, let me just try and see. You're kind of like, well, let me understand it and like kind of do the research. You haven't tried so many of them. You did the carnivore one there for a diet. You're kind of like on a critique version of that now, right? Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, way back when I did Atkins, I've done paleo, and I tried vegetarian for a couple weeks, didn't really stick.
I would.
And then
Would you say that your main drive for your diets would be, from what I understand, it's like with your allergies. You're kind of like, like gluten. I know I just can't do that, so I cut that out. Like it was with Jeff. He's like, oh, I want to gain lean muscle mass, and he's trying to compete, do shows, get bigger, stronger, faster. Obviously, we all want to do that. But would you say, I would have guessed that your main drive for all these diet changes is, I'm tired of being like full of inflammation and bloated from like allergens and stuff like that.
That's definitely my main driver to solve like an issue, right?
And I would say,
of course, want to put on muscle and lose fat and all that stuff.
we all do, of course. But I would almost say that's kind of an important thing that people need to know about diet and nutrition too, is that everybody's going to be different.
Yeah.
So like the diet that Jeff's doing, the rest of us might not be able to, and vice versa with you. Like, all right, maybe you're cutting certain things out that other people aren't going to respond as negatively to and skip their stomachs, and would be beneficial to them in some way.
Yeah. So I've actually been tested for food sensitivity. So it's pretty clear to me. And I would say I've solved about 90% of my issues through diet. And that is, for me, it's definitely cutting out gluten. So wheezing, coughing, sort of sinusitis, and watery eyes. Actually, I haven't been diagnosed yet, but I think I have Sjogren's, which is an autoimmune condition triggered by all this stuff. So gluten, by the way, for a lot of people can trigger autoimmune disease via intestinal permeability. So I think I had that going on a couple of years ago, and I'd say I'm like 90% of the way there. So I'm doing way better. The other thing too, I was born hypoglycemic, which basically, is a blood sugar dysregulation, which if you don't keep that in check, not constantly watching your blood sugars, that can send you into diabetes pretty easily. So I do control my carbs. I'm not anti-carb by any means. I just think for me specifically, I have to be a little more careful. And on top of all that, I got genetically tested. I have hemochromatosis, which is a gene that can set you up to have poor excretion of iron. So you get iron overload. So it's kind of the opposite of iron deficiency anemia. And there's a high correlation between iron overload and diabetes. So I have to be like a little extra careful.
Yeah, I saw you talking about that.
Yeah.
This is recently, right?
Yeah. So I have to do blood donations for that.
Exactly. Keep the iron down.
Yep.
Now, Chris, you were talking something interesting about diets, and you're saying how like fish, for example, like it's not as healthy now as it used to be. And that's something that I've heard you and Jeff kind of use in the past. You're always like, oh, things now aren't the same. You're always comparing like what things are to what they were. Common, we all kind of do that. And for a lot of cases, things were, from what I understand, more nutritiously dense way back when. Like I've heard like chicken in the 70s had like 80% more nutrients and less hormones and antibiotics and everything else in it. But the argument is, and I've kind of thrown this out there before, so you may already have an answer, is, well, then if it's so much worse than it was, why is the average life expectancy constantly going up? Why are people
It's going
bigger,
down.
stronger, faster than they ever were before?
It's going down now, life expectancy.
From the 70s, 60s,
I
70s,
don't know the exact
even
stat,
before
but I
that?
think this generation of kids are, I think, one of the first to actually.
I
have a
think with
shorter
the whole
lifespan.
COVID thing, I remember them saying like around that era, it dropped a couple of years. But for the most part, we're still bigger, stronger, faster. Powerlifting records, speed times, everything that's continuously get better.
Well, there's
Diets.
there's a lot of things to that. So, I mean, there's performance enhancing drugs, right? There's steroids, there's, there's a lot of science, technology behind working out and exercise. There's obviously a lot of money in that, right? Sports, like how much money is in professional sports? So we're definitely highly incentivized to get bigger, faster, and stronger. So I
Okay.
think a percentage of the population is definitely getting bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, just look at hockey these days, it's the same. Like Wayne Gretzky said that if he played hockey nowadays, he would not be dominant. It's just they've gotten so damn good.
Yeah, but I think it goes even further than like people taking steroids and stuff like that. I just think your average person now who doesn't use steroids is got to be like a foot bigger than they were in the 1700s and stuff like that. Probably on average, like they were just short. You ever like go to these old museums, you see these outfits are super short, and they always say that people are constantly getting taller and bigger and just stronger and faster in general. What do you think would contribute to that then? Because diet would be the number one driving force, I would think. And Jeff, you can feel free to kind of chime in this too if you have a thought on it. But that's one thing that always kind of caught me off. I'm like, it makes sense, but everybody's saying, I was like, but how are we being more performance enhanced now than we ever been in previous decades, centuries, you name it?
Well, so you gotta look when it comes to population data, it gets a little tricky, and you gotta look at the whole picture, right? So there is like the end of the bell curve is getting way better, faster, stronger, but the majority of the bell curve is getting fatter, sicker, more diabetic.
So what do you think of then modern medicine? I would think that would probably be like, I was expecting you guys to say that right off the bat. Be
That's
like,
what I
well,
was gonna say.
yeah, I was gonna say, I was kind of,
I think maybe people are living longer, but what's the quality of their life? You know, if you're taking 15 medications and hooked up to tubes and pushing yourself in a wheelchair, like, I don't know that living to 80 over 75 is that something to brag about, you
Right.
know?
That's like the whole Peter Attia sort of argument. It's like, yeah, I want to live long, but I want quality of life too. With
Yeah,
that,
it's the
right?
quality of life,
Yeah.
you know, but we are getting fatter, right? We do have more incidents of diabetes and heart disease than ever before, you know, so maybe we're living longer, but we're also getting sicker at the same time.
Yeah.
it's not as
You
clean of a life.
Yeah,
Well,
or
last
just
couple
that
years.
there's more. So what I was reading is that from the 1950s to now, there have been over 70,000 chemical compounds introduced into our environment, right? From an evolutionary standpoint, that's impossible to withstand because we can't adapt to that.
Yeah.
So could we adapt to,
Yeah.
could we adapt to one or two chemicals? Yeah, of course we can, you know, but can you adapt to the implementation of 1,000 of these at once or 70,000 of these over the last like 70 years?
Right.
You know, what's the impact of that on the human body?
Yeah.
You know, and it's
just not changed that much in that short of a time frame.
right. We just can't.
Well, you guys typically both think that like if it's not natural, it's not good. It's not as good. Like if it's synthetic, you're gonna try to stay away from it. I know Jeff, you definitely will,
Well, yeah, I mean,
and I think you would too. But
my whole life was synthetically.
Yeah. well, I mean, let's just say, but there's certain things
So I'm
that
a little
you,
bit extreme in the other direction because
Sure.
of that, right? So I just feel like I kind of went down that path so far. I'm like anything that's not real, I try to stay away from it
Yep.
because it's just not as good. I mean, it's like taking a vitamin D supplement as opposed to getting vitamin D in food or from the sun,
Mhm.
right? They're not the same.
Right.
They're not equivalent.
Yeah, there's a question of bioavailability. Plus, there's so many things and so many compounds, metabolites, and phytochemicals that we don't even understand that probably interact with the absorption of whatever nutrient. So
But-
you're not going to beat nature.
Well, even like
Yeah.
the fat soluble vitamins,
Yep.
right? Like they put some MCTs and things like that in the supplements so that you're getting some fat with it because you need fat in order to absorb it, but it's still not enough,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah, you talked about bioavailability, and I think that's,
Yep.
well, let me just
That's
throw an
right
example
there.
out there for like, all right, if it's not, you're not going to beat nature. So let's say you gash your leg up, you get a terrible infection, it starts spreading. You need penicillin. There's no plant that you can go out there and grab that's going to get rid of
well,
that.
penicillin came from a plant.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's
But-
it's processed synthetically made by humans.
But I
It's
think
not
that's-
without.
I think that's where medicine is good.
Yeah.
I mean,
right?
everything
think-
we use is
yeah.
from the earth. You know, you could say like
Yeah, I mean-
everything synthetic came from the earth. So like, that's kind of like a,
I mean, don't get me wrong,
I mean,
modern
cool.
medicine's incredible. Like if I get my arm chopped off, take me to the hospital. Like,
so I guess
anytime.
that's what I'm getting at. I was
Yeah.
like, you guys are not so as unbiased to be like, oh, no, if it's synthetic, it's terrible. Like, yeah, modern medicine is good, you know, like.
No, I mean, this
It's-
isn't Monty
we-
Python. I'm not hopping down with my one leg. Like, you're not just gonna live like that.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm definitely not like anti-establishment. I think it has its place. I think that people will also look to say the hospital system or their primary for nutritional, diet and lifestyle advice, and they just don't. This is a systemic issue. They don't have the time to sit there and educate you on nutrition. And and I'm not even sure if most MDs are necessarily interested in nutrition or have studied enough. I mean, they don't really get a lot of nutrition.
No, it's because
They
they
gotta
have
be
such
changing, but
a vast bit of knowledge that they have to go over that it's too short, each bit of it. That's why they all have to go into, their focus, whether it's like cardiology, whatever, this and that, and then they really kind of focus on that. But just to do it all broad range in general, it's just too much. Nobody can
I
be
mean, they're seeing
thoroughly.
like 50 patients a day. They have to do all this documentation. They're just trying to survive their day. They don't really have time to ask like, what's your sleep like? What's your, stress like? What's your nutrition look like? They don't just have that kind of time.
Sure. But I want to go back to, because I was kind of leading up to a second point with this. So as far as like the whole synthetic, just because it's synthetic, you will, if you can, try to stay away from it. But there are exceptions and times where you're like, no, it is great. Modern medicine is fantastic. Technology and like where we've come with it in a long way, it's done phenomenal. So I was reading something earlier today that I don't know a whole lot about. I'm sure you guys don't either, because it's not in the US. It's still awaiting approval. No.
Nice.
Lab grown meat.
Oh yeah.
Have you guys heard of that? Are you familiar with it?
Hard pass.
You've never had it because it's not in the US. You can't buy it, I don't think, yet.
Hard pass. I don't know. I just.
And
I mean,
the reason I ask about it, I'm bringing it up now, is because I knew you guys are all for like, look, if it's not natural, I don't want it, this and that. And I was like, well, there's some things that are synthetic that are good, like medicine, this and that. So I was trying to look online. And that's another thing I want to ask too, is where do you guys get your resources from? Yeah, I think that's important too. Like, what are you reading that's giving you your opinions on how you feel? Like, how legit is it? Like, Jeff, where would you say is your number one area to go for when you're trying to find out about diets, how to eat, etc., workouts, you name it?
I mean, I started with a friend of mine who's a nutritionist. His name's Justin, and he told me, just kind of gave me, I was eating more of the chicken, rice, broccoli, right? This was just 5 years ago, about 5 years ago.
Justin Schold.
No,
Okay.
no, it's a guy we actually know from the gym.
All right.
Guys, he's about our age, super in shape, super knowledgeable about nutrition.
Trainer.
And he was like, Jeff, you need to, he's like, eat more fat, eat less carbs. Right. And so I started to do these things. And as I did, like my body started to change. Right. I was getting leaner. And I was like, well, that's counterintuitive, So he turned me on to some research. And from there, it's just been like, I'll just follow one trail to another. One research study will mention something else or somebody else. Well, I'll go look up that person and see what they've done. I'll hear about a guy who wrote a book. So I'll read his book, and he's citing research and listing other books and authors and people. So I just kind of like follow that trail. And what I find is there's this kind of commonality that runs through all of it, and it's basically eat real food.
That is the same thing that everyone says. No one disagrees with that. No one disagrees with protein. I think the main thing that people disagree on is cholesterol. It's either you think cholesterol is going to kill you, and then you're you tend to be more plant-based, if that's the case, or you think cholesterol is good. You actually need it, and so then you become more sort of the carnivore end of the spectrum. But to answer your question, I would say mostly books, online courses, podcasts, and I'm on PubMed all the time. That's where all the peer-reviewed research is.
Except
I try to read every angle. Like I read Michael Gager's book, How Not to Die, which is very plant-based. I've read the big fat, what's it called? Big Fat Lies or something like that. Big Fat Truth. It's Nina Ty Schultz wrote that one. The Clot Thickens, that was a great one.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly reading those books, and then if there's something that they're citing that I think is really interesting, I'll go and look up the reference and go read that article. So
and
that's
just kind of see where it leads you.
Mhm.
All right. But so the plant-based meat, you would never try it.
I'm gonna let a few generations of people try it, so I'll probably die before I try it.
And I don't know that much about it, but from what I was reading, and this is my go-to is Chat GPT now. And
Yeah.
maybe it's biased, it tries not to be, but it's at least information that's like it's pulling from
Mhm.
resources that are out there. And I was like, is there any synthetic food that's considered better than the original? And do you think it came up with any? Who actually said this lab grown meat. And I was like, well, that's
It
kind of
said
weird.
that?
Yeah. So I was like, explain, I was like, tell me more. I was like, how was this better than the original? And I was like, I didn't understand how it was made. You know, I guess they take cells from a living animal. Cause I'm like, is it vegetarian? I'm thinking like Beyond Meat burgers. And they're like, no, it's not vegetarian. They take cells from like a living animal, living cattle, for example. And then there's like a 10-step process that goes to it where it grows. They put it like on bone marrow, and then it shapes and it forms. Read it. I can't begin to repeat what I was reading, but it was saying that the reason that it's kind of better is because it can be made with no antibiotics, no hormones and stuff like that they're having to pump into these cattle so they don't get like disease and everything else. It's made in a lab. It's like controlled, it's clean. And they're like, and what you can do is you have more control over it too. You can sit here and say, based on people's diet, they can have higher saturated fat, higher unsaturated fat. They can sit here and they can fortify it with vitamins and nutrients that aren't normally in it. Like if somebody has an iron deficiency, they can pump it in there. It was even going to the point of putting like anti-inflammatories in it for people that are dealing with body inflammation or heart disease. They can adjust the omega-3s. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. You could basically critique everybody's diet depending on what they need and put it all together like on a nice, neat platter. But like, that was the first I had read about it. I didn't know if it was anything that you knew. I think it's
Truth, I haven't read enough about it, so I don't know enough. But I still am a little wary of anything in a lab. I mean,
when I first read it too, I was like, hell no. But then I was like, let me read
hygienic
more.
environments. I mean,
Seems
look at
sketchy.
look at a hospital. That's like the number one place to get C. diff, right? So just because
It's also probably the number one place to get cured by C. diff, cured from C. diff.
True. I just eat meat. Why not?
Right.
So I don't know. I'm wary, very wary. What do you think, Jeff?
I mean, I don't think when it comes to genetically modified fruits and vegetables and things like that, there's some research showing that they don't have the same nutrient content or absorbability as the real thing. So there's no history of studying those types of things. I just don't think that when we start to play God, it seems to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, like the history
And
shows
so,
that.
and again, like whether you believe in creation or evolution, we were either by design this way or it's evolved over millions or billions of years. And if you think the last 50 years of human science or our understanding of human science is good enough to take over that process, well, I think that's pretty narcissistic for us to believe that we can do that, especially like inside of a few years.
Yeah.
It would take, I don't know, tens of thousands of years to probably perfect that. And now we have a little bit of history to look back on when it comes to crops and things like that. Well, we haven't done a good job.
No.
We've destroyed the soil.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, I want to kind of talk about that for a second. So going back to some of the synthetic stuff, I like this, we're at a point where sometimes we do need some synthetic vitamins, like B12 deficiency is super common. And you can only really get that from meat. So if you're not eating meat, you can't get it from vegetables.
If
But
someone has low testosterone, they need testosterone, they can get it synthetic.
this is true, but there's a reason you have low testosterone. That comes down to the DLE, the diet, lifestyle, environment. So something you're reacting to. But
Age too, that doesn't help.
well, I don't think that's necessarily true. There's a lot of things that get chalked up to age, like muscle loss, sarcopenia, things like this. Right? I mean, how old's The Rock? That dude's still pretty jacked, right? Like just because you're getting older doesn't mean
16.
you're supposed to have low testosterone and you should get osteoporosis. Those are environmental issues, not necessarily just getting older. There's plenty of people that are old and fit and healthy. And what's that guy, Mark Sisson? Seen that guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's jacked. He's like on the beach in Miami. I forget how old he is. I think he's in his 70s.
Yeah.
He's like playing ultimate frisbee and killing all the younger kids and stuff. And he's just doing the right thing. That's all.
Defying the odds.
Well, they've normalized being unhealthy by the time you're 40.
Yeah.
All right. And what they tell you is like, that's okay. Don't worry about it.
That's
Just
supposed to
take this pill.
Yep.
Right. Don't look at what caused you to get to this point.
Uh-huh.
Just take this pill, treat the symptoms. Don't worry about the cause.
Right.
And that's what we do as a medical industry, right?
Yeah.
We treat symptoms, not causes.
Mhm.
And so, like you said, it's a huge system and they're overburdened probably as it is. And so to sit down with each person and go over, how you should go about correcting these things. When the reality is most people just want you to give them a pill and tell them that to take the pill and everything that they're dealing with will go away and they'll be fine.
Yeah. I also think there's a problem with some of the semantics of the word norm and normal, right?
Yeah, we were just talking about that on the way in here.
Yeah, like just the middle of the bell curve is normative. And we just say, okay, it's normal. So it's normal to be overweight or it's normal. Yeah, that's what the math shows. It doesn't mean that's what you should be. It's not optimal. Normal and optimal are definitely very different.
Totally
things.
different things.
Yeah.
We were just talking about this as we were walking in to your place here. What is normal when it comes to cholesterol levels, blood pressure, heart rate, things like that? We don't know what somebody 1,000 years ago, we don't know what their blood pressure was.
True.
We don't know what their heart rate was or their cholesterol levels. So when you talk about normal, you're basing that on like the last 100 years of data that we have, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And you were even
Top
saying
ten
too,
up.
And
Jeff,
if we're
how like
getting-
the LDLs, like the scale of those had gotten changed.
Yeah, so when they first implemented like this cholesterol committee, 250 was the recommended level for LDL,
Mhm.
right? But as the implementation of statins was going up and it was lowering cholesterol, and they were saying that cholesterol levels are affecting heart disease, well, now they started to change their recommendations for where your LDL should be.
Yep.
But it was more based on, as far as I can tell, the medical protocols that were being implemented, not the results of having lower cholesterol necessarily, LDL specifically.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what everything really boils down to. The LDL thing and that whole story, Ansel Keys, and all that's a whole.
Don't get him started.
Yeah, I know. I could go on
But
did a
we're,
whole season just on that one topic.
but we're all conditioned to think that LDL is a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And when is it really?
Yeah, and I don't think we still fully have the answer. I've been researching that topic like crazy. And I've been through a lot of different phases. I don't think LDL in itself is a problem. I think it's part of the immune system. I think it's there trying to heal basically a scab in the glycocalyx, which is the inner part of the blood vessel. So it's, it's being blamed, but there's also the question of oxidation. There's a ApoB protein that sits on the surface of LDL, and that's the key card that allows because LDL is named cholesterol, by the way, it's a carrier molecule of cholesterol and triglycerides. So when it arrives at a cell sees the ApoB, says, okay, recognize you, lets the cholesterol in. That's the normal process. If the ApoB gets damaged or oxidized from seed oils, sugars, then it's left in circulation. That seems to be a problem as well. So I think we're still getting some answers there, but it's definitely not the villain that we thought it was.
No,
Yeah.
I would agree with that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
It has a lot of functions in the body.
Yeah.
And I was reading about statins and about what they do. I forget what the inhibitor name of the statin actually is, but there's basically a 6-enzyme process that results in cholesterol production in the body. So statins knock out step number 2, right? So it goes from step 1 to step 2. The statin comes in and knocks out step number 2. So therefore 3, 4, 5, and 6 don't happen. Well, 3, 4, and 5 on the way to making cholesterol, they all have other functions in the body. So when you take that statin and knock out step number 2 in this 6-enzyme chain, those other enzymes don't get created, but they're not just there for the function of cholesterol. They have other functions in the body. So it's like, is it more important to stop the production of cholesterol or to continue the other functions that are going on, because
Why is
that
our,
chain reaction of events?
why would our body just make something that's inherently bad for us?
Well,
there's that
it
too, right?
doesn't. And so that's the thing. And that's again what I think the problem is with the medical industry is we try to isolate one thing and treat that one thing, but that's not how things work in their environment. And in the human body specifically, there's a whole reaction of things that go on when you affect one hormone level or cholesterol or whatever it is. And so you can't just look at, did we lower cholesterol? Well, yes, you did. If that's the only marker of success, then your drug worked because cholesterol went down. But what were the effects of that to the overall organism? And I think that's where we fail to holistically evaluate.
Yes, totally. So this is a problem with Western medicine. It is just inherently very siloed, right? You've got a doc for your thyroid, a doc for your, that's just how the system is right now. That has its advantages, but it has disadvantages like that. This is why I think functional medicine is the future of medicine, because it's going to look at the whole person, look at whole patterns.
Yeah.
But it also goes back to that, each doctor has their specialty because there's so much information. Like, no, there's just so much information out there. They would only have 15 minutes of studying for each little topic to be able to cover it all. So they're like, all right, let's take specialties. And they just kind of perfect it.
Well, maybe ChatGPT will be filling in all the blanks.
I mean, it makes you wonder.
Well, I just want to point out one other funny thing with the whole LDL thing. So LDL is known to be bad, right? Because it's small and sneaky and gets into the arteries, right? HDL is good, right? HDL is smaller than LDL. So how does that make any sense? If the argument that LDL is bad because it's small and gets in the arteries, then why is HDL good? I don't know. I just a lot of holes in the argument.
Yeah, there's conflicting information that's out there. And I think that's one of the big problems that we all deal with when it comes to how do I find good information? What do I look at? And to me, that's why I just go back to eat real food, right? Like if we evolved to this point, or if we were created to eat this food and function this way, that's probably the best solution. And I don't think we can come up with something better than that, especially in this short amount of time that we've actually been studying these things.
Yeah.
We don't fully understand how the body functions. Most of it's a guess. We isolate cells and enzymes and try to see how they react in a petri dish, but that's not how that actually functions when it's inside of the body.
Yeah.
You're trying to isolate it and see how it functions for this one purpose.
Right.
But there's a whole network of other things that go on when you do that. So I think really, yeah, it goes back to the eat real food.
Yep. What do you think is the number one thing to avoid in your diet?
Sugar.
Sugar? I'm always between processed sugar.
Yeah.
I think cane sugar might be okay or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, processed. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll say, definitely the high fructose corn syrup for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
And then between that and the seed oils.
Seed oils are up there.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I knew seed oil.
They're trying to take the lead.
I kind of think seed oils may be even worse.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence that reading lately. I mean, it's just so highly inflammatory and it just does so much bad for us.
Yeah.
I put gluten number
Oxidative
3.
stress.
I would say gluten number 3 in this country.
Okay.
I think gluten in a different country is a different story because of the whole glyphosate thing.
Yeah.
Because that's banned in a lot of other countries. So I am highly sensitive to gluten. If I have it, I know if I'm like, oh, I just got gluten. Like I know when I have it. But when I went to Colombia recently, and I first thing I did is Google, is glyphosate banned in Colombia? It was yes. I was like, okay, bring me some breads and pasta. I've been dying to have that. No issue whatsoever.
So I think I watched a special with Alfie Oakes, who, if you're not local to Naples, the guy owns a
Seed to table.
place here called Seed to Table, and his whole concept is he owns everything from the farm to the retail side of it. So the distribution, the processing, all that stuff, he owns everything from seed to table. And he talked about the flour that we use in this country and how different it is than flour that comes from other countries. And he actually buys heirloom wheat from a company in Utah that he pays several times more for. So his contention is that it's a lot of the gluten allergies we have in this country also because of the type of flour that we're using.
Yeah.
So
I did see this podcast with Dr. Stephanie Seneff. It was on the Food Lies podcast, by the way. And she wrote a whole book on this topic of glyphosate. And I may be getting the exact details wrong, but it went something like this. Gluten is a sticky protein that's just hard for any human to digest. I've come to believe that some people are not gluten sensitive, but some people are lucky enough to be gluten tolerant. Anyways, so so it's hard for most people to digest gluten on its own, but wheat usually comes with an enzyme that helps us break that down. When you spray the glyphosate on the wheat, then it kills the enzyme. You're only left with the sticky gluten. So yeah, I've been interested to see if that one from Utah, if they spray glyphosate on it or not.
Yeah,
because if they do, then it's a moot point. You're saying.
Yeah, that if her theory is right, which sounds very reasonable, then then it wouldn't matter.
All right, so let me ask you this, man, going back to the LDL and HDL. So I'm doing a quick little search and just to completely understand why, according to the internet, why LDL is considered bad and HDL is considered good. Now, maybe to layman's term, this is probably what you were trying to say earlier, but LDLs are often considered bad because they're the ones that transport cholesterol to the tissues, including the arteries. And that can kind of develop in plaque and clogging them. Whereas HDLs are kind of removing that.
Well, so the question is delivering cholesterol to tissues bad?
There it is.
I mean, I don't think so. There's something called Smith-Lemli-Oppitz syndrome, where these poor kids are born with the inability to produce enough LDL and therefore don't get enough cholesterol to their tissues and they die young. So I think we need cholesterol.
Sure. But I mean, I guess the way they're saying it, this is the LDL with it transporting cholesterol to the tissues, the buildup of cholesterol in the artery walls, forming plaques, they can kind of narrow and harden the arteries, in terms kind of clogging them, right? So,
So,
I mean, would you agree with that? Like, yes, that is what they do, or?
well, probably not. So what hardens the arteries is a whole nother topic, right? So, for example, calcium, too much calcium, we're told we should take calcium for bone density. Well, too much, if you have the wrong calcium vitamin K status, your body will start putting that into the artery wall. And that's what calcification is. It's calcium, calcification. That's just one thing. There's another article come out recently with, they found all kinds of plastic in arterial walls. I think we're gonna find out, and maybe someone already has, kind of what I was saying earlier, where LDL is part of our immune system. In fact, people with higher LDL did better with COVID.
Yeah.
It's going there to repair. So this is where the book Clot Thickens, Malcolm McKendrick talks about something is causing damage to the glycocalyx. So picture like fish scales are really slippery. That's what the inside of arterial walls look like. That's what a glycocalyx is. So we want that to be nice and slippery so that blood and everything can flow through there.
Sure.
But things can damage it. For example, smoke, cigarette smoke, wood smoke, so too much campfires even, pollution, things like that can cause stress on the arterial wall and glycocalyx. Then LDL is going there trying to repair it. And that is, so a lot of people use the analogy. It's like saying the fireman is the fault for the fire, right? They're there trying to clean up, you know what I mean? So it's a pretty good analogy.
I mean, because of course, some fat is needed in those walls, in the arteries. I mean, we're comprised of a lot of fat. Our brain wouldn't function without,
Yeah,
fat.
brain's most of that.
Cholesterol.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Like cholesterol too.
Yeah, and I always wondered this like increase in dementia and stuff is part of that the fact we're telling people not to eat saturated fat.
Yeah.
I mean, literally the myelin sheet of all your nerves is saturated fat.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I had another point I was gonna make.
That's a
about
good
that.
point.
Oh, another thing too, I saw, Mike Mutzel. He's kind of a master of blood work. He talks about shear stress. So, and this is something I worry about too in me, is if you have, your blood is too thick, it creates too much shear stress on the glycocalyx and could potentially damage it. So if your hematocrit and hemoglobin are really high, which could happen with hemochromatosis, and create too much shear, and maybe that's another thing causing damage to the arterial wall. So I think there's a lot of variables there. I
Okay.
think LDL is just taking the blame for all of it.
Yeah, nothing is that simple.
Right.
Right. That's what you're talking about from a holistic or functional medicine type of approach, is that, again, it goes back to like, we're trying to look at one thing and say that that's the culprit for all of it, but that doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so to blame everything on cholesterol, specifically LDL, well, that just seems counterintuitive.
Mhm.
Actually, this book I just read called Understanding the Heart by Dr. Stephen Hussey, he talks about, he cites a research study where the people at highest risk for heart disease actually had between 70 something and 90 something LDL. The safest were between 170 and 190, something like that.
Yeah.
So almost twice what they say we're supposed to be maintaining for healthy, which is under 100.
Yeah.
But those actually were the most at risk for certain issues, whereas higher LDL was the best.
Yeah, I saw a recent article saying there's kind of a U-shaped curve to the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's a sweet spot.
Yeah.
What are LDL and HDL levels according to
Under 100 is what's recommended
for
by
LDL?
yeah,
And what about HDL? What are those levels supposed to
between
be at?
40 and 100.
I think so. It's
Yeah.
kind of like as high as possible.
Yeah. Over
Oh,
40
okay.
mainly. It needs to be, they say it needs to be over 40.
So HDL levels are lower than LDLs
Yes.
typically?
What's
Jeff,
acceptable? Well, because HDL, they don't have an upper range that's too high. So with
The more the
LDL,
better.
they have a
Okay.
limit for how high it should go. With HDL, they have a limit of how low it should go.
which is
So
40.
LDL is 100, HDL is 40.
I see what you're saying. Now
Yeah.
you had your levels checked a little
Yeah.
while back ago. Do you remember what yours were?
Yeah. So no, I don't. I know my HDL was only like 41, so it was like barely what they say.
And your diet's
is
a lot
necessary.
different now than what it was then.
It's a
when you
lot
had your-
different now. Yeah. I don't eat chicken. I eat lots of eggs, but I was doing mainly eggs and fish. And now I've switched to more eggs and red meat because I just believe that that's probably the healthiest thing that you can do.
Egg whites, egg yolks, whole thing.
The whole thing.
How many
yeah.
eggs do you eat in a given day?
5. I eat 5 every day.
No, do you cut it off at 5 because you just don't want to eat anymore? Or you like, I think that's kind of too much, or that's enough.
It's just about the quantity of, like, it's enough protein that I'm getting there because I'm drinking raw milk with it at the same time.
Yeah,
So
Because
yeah.
if you look at it,
Yeah.
one egg, an egg yolk has your whole day's
Yeah, it's like
of
71 or something percent of
cholesterol you're supposed to
cholesterol.
have.
Yeah.
I just noticed that like a week ago. 'Cause
Yeah.
I was like having 3 eggs. I mean, it was like, what are you doing with all that cholesterol? I'm like, it's 3. I think that's like a healthy daily normal. She's like, look it up. And again, it's like, what source is
Well-
who's saying it? But it was like 1 egg has the daily. I'm like, good
Yeah.
grief.
So look this up too, and I'm sure Chris knows this, is that I think it's over 90%, maybe over 90% of the population has no issue with their body self-regulating the production of cholesterol based on the intake. So when you intake more, your body will just produce less.
The counter.
A very small percentage of people don't have that capacity, but virtually everyone is able, their body is able to adjust to the amounts of cholesterol that they're intaking via their diet. And so you'll just produce less if you're getting more from the diet.
And then the liver just excretes it basically.
Well,
Like
you're
when
just
you go
not
over?
producing as much.
All right.
And so the cholesterol is coming in from your diet. I think we produce quite a bit of cholesterol in the body. But when you're ingesting it, your body's just not producing as much.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 points I want to make there. So I've seen a number of articles saying that there is no evidence that eating dietary cholesterol raises dietary cholesterol. I've seen that. Now you can find evidence from pretty much wherever you want, by the way. So I've seen some of that.
Pull out your stupid phone, Jim, and
Yeah.
look it up. I see what you're trying to say here.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other topic. There are predatory journals that will just, if you pay them money, they'll publish it. So that's something to be wary of too. That's where, a lot of research is bought, unfortunately. So I've seen some of that. And then also there is the David Feldman. He's got I think he came up with this idea of the lean mass hyper responder. There are some people that go carnivore and they're in really good shape like you guys, but then their cholesterol just goes through the roof. Everyone freaks out, but they seem to have no issue.
Yeah.
It's just a phenomenon that we don't understand yet.
Yeah. Fasting can cause cholesterol levels to go up. But that doesn't necessarily, as far as I understand it, actually contribute to heart disease.
Right.
I don't think cholesterol is specifically the problem when it comes to heart disease. I think there's myriad other factors that's going on that are causing heart disease, not just cholesterol. Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Any other questions around that? Oh, I will say one other thing too. Now, so I am studying functional medicine, and one of the patterns for blood sugar dysregulation, you look at your, hemoglobin, your glucose and insulin, but one of the patterns that suggests there may be a metabolic issue developing is a pattern of high LDL, high triglycerides, and low HDL. So that is a sort of a secondary marker for blood sugar dysregulation. Now, blood sugar dysregulation can create heart disease. It can create high blood pressure and plaques. So in that sort of secondary way, maybe that's where the signal is coming from. So maybe LDL going up, HDL going down, maybe suggesting, okay, there's a blood sugar issue going on. So maybe that has gotten somehow conflated into all this research into heart disease, the LDL being to blame. It's just part of a bigger pattern. So there is a signal there that we don't fully understand.
Now, when you go as deep to say like, oh, I think the worst thing you can eat is sugars, are you going like referring to carbs as well? Because those break down on the
Mainly
turn of sugar.
processed.
Okay.
Yeah, mainly processed.
They behave differently in the body.
Okay,
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
breads, rice, potatoes, stuff like that. No, that's fine.
Well, I mean, where do you get the bread? Did you make it yourself? With some quality wheat that you bought? And
So let's say rice. It's a whole food, heavy carb, white rice. You'd be like,
I think there's
you say
mixed
try to avoid
information
it.
on rice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of stuff on it. So you're getting other stuff with it. There's, some fibers, some things that can feed the gut. So there's a whole gut microflora discussion. If you're just having high fructose corn syrup, there's nothing to it. So
Yeah,
have you heard of protein leverage theory? I think this is kind of at play. There's probably a nutrient version of it too. So your body needs to sort of check the box on certain things like protein, right? And you will just not be satiated until you've reached what you need to survive for the day. So if you're just like on a plant-based diet, eating a bag of chips, you can just eat the whole bag of chips and not be satiated because your body's like, I need.
you didn't give me what I want.
There's no
Right.
signal to shut off that
Right. So
hunger. Yeah.
if you have a whole bunch of corn syrup and candy and junk food like that, you're not gonna satiate all the things you need, so you're just gonna ingest more naturally. And then you have diabetes. I think diabetes is the number one thing to avoid to stay healthy. There's a great book, Why We Get Sick by Benjamin Bitten. If you don't follow him on Instagram, you should. Bikman. And the whole book is about how basically blood sugar dysregulation is one of the biggest homeostatic regulators of the body. When that goes off, everything goes off from there. Thyroid goes off, autoimmune disease develops, gut issues develop, testosterone plummets. It all starts there. So
Now, Chris, you're not lactose intolerant, right?
no, I'm supposedly sensitive to dairy, but I'll
But-
tell you that just from blood tests,
But milk's fine.
I
Like that.
seem to do fine. It doesn't produce any symptoms in me that I can tell.
Now, I know you, when you can find it, you like to drink raw milk.
Mhm.
Well, what's your reason for that? Is there like
It's
some
more
nutrients in it?
nutrients,
Okay, so it's more,
K2, I believe, is that the one, Jeff? K2 is like kind of hard to find. It tends to be high in that.
Yeah, and glutathione.
Yep,
Yeah.
glutathione, so you want that.
okay, yeah, because Jeff drinks 2 gallons of
I
raw
drink
milk. a week.
2 gallons a week of raw milk.
So
Yeah.
like you're
Yeah.
you drink more milk than anything else.
Yeah, I probably
Like-
have I like 3 times a day. I eat 3 times a day. I have 3 glasses of raw milk
You
every
do?
day. Yeah.
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 That's awesome.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah,
Now, I do a lot more
that's-
kefir than I do raw milk.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I have some gut issues I'm also trying to solve, and that's so I try to feed the gut as much as I can.
And so that's why I was kind of wondering. I was like, I know you kind of limit your dairy and stuff like that. So I didn't know with you trying to drink the raw milk, what your angle behind that was.
I wouldn't say I limit my dairy. There was a point where I sort of had to become hypersensitive to everything, and then I went really strict, a really minimal diet. But since I've really cut out gluten and solved some of these issues, milk does not seem to
You
bother
mean
me.
like cutting back on what you were eating and re-implementing one thing at a time to see if it was
Yeah,
causing any
basically
issues?
went
Yeah, like
carnivore.
the elimination.
Yeah, exactly, with the carnivore elimination. And
Yeah.
that solved a lot of issues for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So Chris, as far as protein in a given week, how many times do you eating red meat? How many times do you eating fish, chicken? Like, what does your weekly intake look like?
I eat red meat almost every day, probably every day. And if I don't, it's only because some
I
sort of
didn't have any.
logistical reason.
If I don't, it's because I already ate it and I can't find any.
I typically have 4 eggs a day, sometimes 5, depends on how hungry I am. That's my limiting factor, is how hungry I am.
No,
With
there's
some cheese, right?
is there only certain types of red meat that you're going for, or is there some that you're like, no, these are the ones, these are
I mean, I'm always trying to do grass fed, grass finished when possible. That's not always the case. So, you just do your best to mitigate. I just, ribeyes. Who doesn't love ribeye?
bison, beef? Does
Yeah,
it matter?
just-
Kind of, okay,
Cow.
okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna shy away from bison. I love lamb. I mean, I love all red meat. I wish we could get elk easily. I'd love to try that. Never had it.
Sprouts.
I mean, I usually just look at whatever looks the darkest. That's what I get.
I got venison the other day, I had ground venison, made like a shepherd's pie with it. And I actually had my first bison strip steak.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it tastes just like the beef, but I guess there's far less, and I hate to say this in front of you, less cholesterol. So I was like, all right, let me try this. Let me see how it is. Maybe that's one of the reasons why you don't eat it, I'm assuming.
I look for dark red and fat. So that's
Yeah.
why I like ribeye.
Yeah.
I'm not like, if it's lean, I'm like, I don't care.
Now, Jeff,
Sure,
what kind
on
of,
sale or, but it's not like I'm going for lean meat.
okay, and you're not too picky about it. You're like, no, just give me dark.
Dark and fat.
All right, Jeff, what about you? If you're gonna be going for red meat, is there a particular
No, I mean, I just go to Circle C Farms. I don't know if you've heard of Circle C Farm.
Yes.
It's a little Dominican family that owns a plot of land kind of up in Estero, and they slaughter the animals and they take them to their little store. And so it's kind of right there. It's local.
oh, they have like their own little butcher setup?
They have a
right from the
well, they
store?
have a butcher facility,
All
and they
right.
bring it right to their little retail store.
Oh, nice.
So, but whatever cuts of meat they have, I've become big on they make a bone marrow broth that I drink all the time.
Delicious.
Yeah, I just drink it. I just drink a cup a day.
That's awesome.
Like,
Yeah.
like you're having a cup of tea.
Yep, just like a cup of tea. Yeah,
Yeah.
You were doing that for a while too.
Yeah, I told you.
collagen.
Yeah,
right?
collagen's huge. I mean, I
Yeah.
talk about collagen constantly. It's
Yeah.
everyone's deficient because you get it mostly from meat off the bone. Most people shy away from meat off the bone, right? Everyone likes like to the square grouper. They don't want all the bones in the fish. They don't want to see the
Something that's
face.
easier to eat. Yeah, it's like less
Well,
cleaning up. You
I
gotta
think
do
there's a
that.
lot of squeamishness in American culture. So
Yeah,
that's part of it. So we all tend to be collagen deficient.
yeah. I don't want
So-
to eat something that's looking at me.
Yeah, see, I like that. I want to I want to be connected to my food. So I mean, I definitely do supplement with collagen. I drink something that's like 98% absorbable. But when possible, I will do bone broth. I tore my meniscus playing soccer in the yard with Andre. And I made my own bone broth for a month, just drank it every day until it like went away.
Now, let me ask both of you guys the same question too. What supplements are you currently taking right now?
Collagen, sometimes glutathione, liposomal. I take berberine for blood sugar, and I think that's it.
I take saw palmetto, which is
Uh-huh.
kind of a prostate health. type of a thing, supposed to help with the breakdown of testosterone into DHT, which is a cause of a lot of the low T issues that guys deal with. So I take saw palmetto, and I take a zinc and magnesium supplement, which I'm in the process of eliminating. I have glutamine and creatine. I think I've been researching all of the, because I've been switching over the last month to eating a lot more red meat. You have a decent amount of glutamine that comes
And
in.
creatine.
Yeah,
I
and
was gonna say,
creatine.
and creatine.
Creatine, I'm not quite sure if I'm getting as much as I want, but maybe that's more just in my head. Oh, I need 5 grams a day because that's what they sell you.
Well, you can
Right.
kind of like go as much as you want creatine. It's so safe and so
Yeah.
well studied, and it's got so many benefits. So
You're supposed to cycle it though, right? Like, don't they say take it for a couple months, take a month off? Like, that's how it used to be when I was younger.
all the research I'm seeing now is like,
Just take it.
Because that's what Jess takes in. He's like, no, I just take it straight
taking it
through.
for
He's like,
years.
I don't stop. And I'm like, I finished like a container, then I'll stop for a little bit. In fact, I just finished mine like a week ago. So I'm like, all right, I'll go off for a month or two. And I'm like, I don't know if it makes any big of a difference or if you heard anything
I've
differently.
heard of like you adapt to it and you stop responding. I don't know. I haven't seen any actual research. It sounds kind of like bro science stuff.
You've taken creatine before. I know you're not now, but
Yeah.
like, yes, you know like how it
Bro
works.
science
It
for
is
sure.
really bro science.
Yeah.
Once or
So
twice.
the supplement thing, I've been trying to eliminate as many as I can and get it from my food. Here's one of the things I think is an issue with supplementation. Supplement means in addition to, not in
Yes.
place of. And I think what too many people do
The
is they
opposite.
supplement a bad diet with vitamin D or magnesium or whatever, and they think they're doing a good job because now they're getting their vitamins, right? Well, you didn't clean, if you were low on magnesium or vitamin D or vitamin K or A or whatever, it's because your diet sucks, not because you weren't taking the supplement.
Yeah.
And so this is what I started down this path. I was taking a beetroot supplement. I forget, it wasn't like super beets, but it was one of those like
Yeah.
that. And the reason I was doing it is because with all of my years of IV drug use, I had lost my vascularity. And so I was like, okay, how do I get my veins back? Is this possible? So I looked at like arginine.
Yeah,
one of the big
that's
things.
the first one I was saying.
Yeah, and so beetroot juice is high in arginine,
Yep.
right? You have watermelon, which has L-citrulline, which converts to arginine, right? So I'm taking this beetroot supplement, and then I started to look at, well, how can I get that in my food? So I started to look at what foods I could use to replace this supplement. Well, now I'm eating like peppers and garlic and watermelon. And so I'm adding all of these positive things into my diet and eliminating the supplement. So my diet increased, got better, improved, and potentially so did the issue I was trying to solve by trying to eat more arginine, right? So it's like, I think if you look at how you can use food as a drug, it's hugely beneficial, but the food source is always better than the supplement source.
Absolutely.
If you're getting all of the vitamin A you can from your diet and you still have a deficiency, okay, maybe now you implement the supplement because the natural supply isn't doing it.
Right.
But I think the problem is people run to the supplements instead. This is again the taking the pill issue. Right.
It's like the Ozempic thing right now. Like, everyone's just doing the Ozempic and just not changing their diet, and they're
Yes.
losing weight because the drug's so
Yeah,
powerful.
but you're not healthier,
Right.
right? You're just a thinner version of your unhealthy self.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's what I was trying to get. Is just wanted you guys to agree that synthetic isn't always bad. I knew you guys were taking
Well,
some
but that's
supplements
what I
and stuff
just
that
said
wasn't,
that I
but I
was
know that
doing.
you try not to.
Yeah,
But I
I've
think
been
what you
trying
said
to
is right. I was
eliminate
like, it's not so much that they're bad. It's just that people are taking them instead
it.
of
Yes.
a additional to.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I
would agree with
there-
that.
There are certain nutrients that are just hard to get these days because of our environment, because of monocropping and soil depletion, like magnesium's a big one. You mentioned, I think that's probably one of the number one deficiencies.
Yeah.
Salt.
I think it's the
Salt's
number one.
actually a deficiency because everyone's afraid of it.
Yeah. I
Um,
think magnesium is the number one taken supplement. I think it's taken over everything
Yep.
because everyone pretty much is deficient in it. And
And it also helps people sleep. Everyone's under
Yeah.
so there's that too.
yeah.
I said that, probably B12 and all the fat solubles, A, D, and K, are probably the most common deficiencies.
Yeah.
I was taking desiccated liver supplements for a while too, just to kind of cover all bases. But because I'm high iron, I stopped taking it.
Is it high in iron? Is that what it is?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But with
Yeah.
you donating, like doing your blood, donating the blood, whatever, that kind of like keeps it under control for you, right?
Yeah, but you can only donate every 56 days. I'm still kind of new on this path of blood donation and watching what ferritin, by the way, is the molecule to look at,
Okay.
not iron. It's kind of counterintuitive. Iron is the least sensitive marker for iron. Only 1% is actually floating in your bloodstream. So ferritin is a storage molecule for iron. So if you want to look at your iron levels, look at ferritin. It gets a little confusing too, because if you're inflamed, it can be high, sort of overrepresented, because your body will lock up iron to prevent bacteria from replicating, because they need iron. So you have to know all these little things. So I've been watching my ferritin levels and donating, see if I can get it in check. If I get in check, if it goes low, maybe I'll go back to liver supplements. Not sure.
Okay. We are still in the early stages of seeing.
Yeah.
It's kind of hot in here. It'd be nice to do an ice bath.
Okay, I think we covered a lot. Is there anything else you guys want to go over?
No, I mean, I think we did pretty good there.
You were trying to get us to say medical establishment is bad, synthetic good.
No, I was just trying to make this an unbiased conversation. I knew I was gonna
Yeah,
have,
but
I
it's-
knew I would be,
like,
it would be me versus you two in every
it's fair to
aspect.
ask all those questions,
Yeah,
that was-
because I think that's the kind of collective consciousness that we have
Yeah.
is, yeah, cholesterol is bad.
Yeah.
Right. Medical industry has your best interest at heart, right? I'm not sure that's actually true. I don't think they're like nefariously, conducting evil. But I think the problem, it's like the 1 degree thing, right? I think they've gone a little bit in the wrong direction and continue to do that over a long period of time. And they're not willing to step back and reevaluate and move forward in a better direction.
Yeah, it's insurance companies really is what
It's all
boils down
about,
to,
yeah.
Which again, don't get you started on insurance companies.
Yeah. I read a whole
That was
book
one of
called- I
the
read a
first
book
things you
called
wanted to get out of.
Fuck
Yeah,
Insurance.
that was one of the first things you had to get yourself out of. Like not
Yeah.
dealing with them.
All right, well, I guess we should wrap this up. So guys,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah.
podcast. This was fun.
Yeah, it's
gotta-
always fun
gotta
talking
do it
about,
again
talking
sometime.
about food.
Once Chef gets his website up and running, this would be a good way to advertise it too, man. Gotta get it
Yeah,
Oh,
out.
yeah, tell us about this website.
Well, it's still in the early stages of it, but it's one that no
I
better
don't want to
person.
say too much
to
about
Okay.
it. I'll tell you.
When you're ready.
Yeah.
Early
we'll get
stage.
you back on the podcast.
But we got a surprise
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
on his next podcast
Yeah, yeah.
appearance.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, guys, well, thanks again, and I guess we'll be talking to you soon.
Yeah.
Um,
Chris like, oh